Was the year 1990.
The 90s is commonly seen as the very last great generation. It was an era without social media, smartphones, apps, and all that malarkey. Anyway, I am here to carry on my It Was the Year series, starting from 1990. Now, I've already done a video on 1990, so please do check it out, but it didn't quite get completed, so I'm going over it again, and this time there is a lot more to go through. The top 10 movies of 1990 grossed a massive $1.5 billion in box office revenue, which, when adjusted for inflation in today's market, is over $3.8 billion. Without any further ado, let's jump straight into the movies. Kindergarten Cop. Arnold Schwarzenegger stars as John Kimball, a tough Los Angeles police detective working undercover as a kindergarten teacher to locate the wife and child of a drug dealer, Colin Crisp. Kimball partners with fellow detective Phoebe O'Hara. Both of them are sent on assignment to Astoria, Oregon to find Rachel, the missing wife of the drug dealer. She is offered immunity in exchange for testifying against Crisp in court. Kimball has zero teaching experience and hilariously struggles to cope at first, before adapting to his new status. Kindergarten Cop is directed by the late great Ghostbusters director Ivan Reitman. Both Bill Murray and the late Patrick Swayze were considered for the role of Kimball before it eventually went to Schwarzenegger. Arnie's twin co-star Danny DeVito was also considered by Reitman, but felt that DeVito's height, all 5 foot of him, would not be believable. So Arnie got the role. Exterior scenes for this movie were shot in Astoria, Oregon, where the movie takes place, and it's made on a budget of just $20 million. The film grossed over $202 million, so more than making up its budget and grossing a very nice sum of money. And it was the 10th highest grossing film of the year 1990, adding to Arnie's impressive film resume. It was 1990, and the following year, a certain movie involving AI computers and cyborg machines was to follow, and it set all kinds of records, but that's for another time. Kindergarten Cop is a fun action comedy with Arnie showing more in his repertoire than just the standard action man, an entertaining feel-good comedy. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The Ninja Turtles are the cornerstones of 80s and 90s pop culture. Having already established themselves with the popular 87 animated show, things went to the next level with this movie. It was my first ever foray into the world of the Turtles. It was a gritty, dark, and semi-violent take on the characters when compared to the animated show of the 80s. It was based on the 80s comic books from Mirage Studios. A group of 4 humanoid turtles live under the streets of New York with their master Sensei Splinter, a human rat. The city of New York is under siege by a host of robberies perpetrated by a gang of ninja thieves known as the Foot Clan, headed up by their leader, the Shredder. Reporter April O'Neil is in the line of fire as she reports on their operations, seeking to bring them to justice. The turtles come to her rescue, and Splinter tells her of their history. Splinter is later kidnapped, and the turtles turn to April to help find him. In battle against the Foot Clan, the turtles are helped by vigilante Casey Jones. A final battle sees the turtles go up against the Foot and Shredder. Splinter is eventually rescued, and he comes face to face with the Shredder. The success of this movie cannot be understated. It was an independent movie that did well in the box office, grossing over $202 million and being the 5th highest grossing film in the US alone and the 9th overall worldwide. It helped catapult the popularity of the Turtles into superstardom. Over 35 years on, and it is still considered the best Ninja Turtles movie of all time. Presumed Innocent. Harrison Ford of Indiana Jones and Star Wars lore stretched his acting chops in this legal thriller based on the 1987 novel of the same name by Scott Turow. The premise of the movie sees Ford's character Rusty Savage, a prosecutor assigned to investigate the murder of his colleague Carolyn, with whom he had had a past affair. As Rusty digs deep into the case, he uncovers details that implicate him including evidence of the affair and potentially incriminating forensic evidence. The investigation becomes increasingly intense with personal dilemmas and political intrigue as Rusty's boss Raymond Horgan is up for re-election, and the opposing rival Nicole De La Guardia uses Rusty's situation and exploits it for his gain to help win the election and destroy Horgan's reputation in the process. There is a shocking revelation as to who the actual killer is, adding to this very suspenseful and intriguing movie. Scott Turrell's 1987 novel Presumed Innocent had first attracted film producers a year before it was published. The film rights were subject of a bidding war amongst a host of established studios and producers, with the eventual winners being Warner Brothers. The movie grossed an impressive $221 million and was the 8th highest grossing film worldwide in 1990. There were a number of high-profile actors considered for the role, including Kevin Costner and Robert Redford, but as we saw, Harrison Ford won out, and he gave a very strong performance as Rusty. Die Hard 2: Die Harder. Bruce Wayne returns as Lieutenant John McClane in this explosive and bigger sequel. Last time it was saving the Nakatomi Plaza from a group of international terrorists. This time it's saving Dulles International Airport from a disgraced former military colonel and his band of ex-military men who are plotting to rescue a corrupt foreign military leader. The group remotely operate out of a church on the outskirts of the airport, cutting all communications with incoming planes, disabling all runway lighting, and demand that the military leader Esperanza's plane be allowed to land without interference, or they threaten to crash several planes. One of the unfortunate victims is McClane's wife, whose plane is running low on fuel. This leaves McClane in a perilous situation, having to take on the terrorists while dealing with the ill-tempered airport police chief Lorenzo and finding a way to save his wife. There is an appearance from Robert Patrick, who would go on to play the T-1000 in Terminator 2 the following year. Die Hard 2 exceeded all expectations by outperforming the box office success of its predecessor. The film had the largest pre-opening, earning $3.7 million from 1,828 theaters, the 8th domestic highest earning movie of the year and the 7th worldwide overall, making a whopping $240 million. Die Hard 2 is hilariously considered a Christmas movie as the events of the film take place just before the Christmas holidays. Die Hard 2 is one of Bruce Willis's all-time great movies, and he lights up the screen as only he knows how. Back to the Future 3. Michael J. Fox returns for the 3rd time in the Back to the Future franchise as Marty McFly, alongside Christopher Lloyd as Dr. Emmett Doc Brown, aka Doc. Marty McFly discovers Doc was trapped in 1885 and discovers his tombstone, finding out that he was taken out by Buford Tannen, Mad Dog, whom is the great-grandfather of Marty's nemesis, Biff Tannen. Marty must race against time to prevent Doc from getting murdered whilst fixing the DeLorean and find a way to get back to 1985. But things take an unexpected turn when Doc falls in love with schoolteacher Clara Clayton, which interferes with their escape plans. All ends well when Marty is able to return to his time in 1985, and Doc ends up with Clara and, along with their 2 sons, head off into an unknown future. This brought an end to the Back to the Future series and received mostly positive reviews, with critics saying the film brought a satisfying conclusion. The movie also won a Saturn Award for Best Music. It was the 6th highest grossing film of 1990, bringing in $245 million worldwide, and further cemented Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd as A-listers in Hollywood. Total Recall. Arnold Schwarzenegger's second entry on this list. He had already established himself as one of Hollywood's top action stars from the 80s, and here at the beginning of the 90s he continued his impressive run of films. He stars in this sci-fi dystopian action flick. The movie is set in the year 2084, and Mars is under the rule of the villainous Vilos Cohagen. Arnie plays a construction worker, Douglas Quaid, who repeatedly has dreams about Mars and a mysterious woman. He discovers a company known as Recall that implants false memories on its subjects, of which he is taken and implanted with a memory, believing he is a Martian secret agent. With the help of the mysterious woman known as Melina, he fights to free Mars from Cohagen's tyrannical rule and free himself from the dream. Total Recall was anticipated to be one of the most successful films of 1990, and its $261.4 million worldwide gross saw to that, and it made it the 5th highest grossing film of the year. The reviews were a mixed bag, with some praising its production value and on its performances, but others being very negative on the vulgarity and the violence. The film won the award for Best Visual Effects at the 63rd Academy Awards in 1991, and it is known as one of the greatest sci-fi action flick films of all time. Dances with Wolves. Kevin Costner stars and directs this Western-based film based on the 1988 novel Dances with Wolves by Michael Blake. He plays a wounded Civil War soldier, John Dunbar, who tries to commit self-deletion but instead becomes a war hero. He develops a relationship with a band of Lakota Indians and is attracted by the simplicity of their lifestyle and chooses to leave his former life behind to be with them. He's given the name Dances with Wolves, and he is a welcomed member of the tribe. He falls in love with a white woman who has been raised by the tribe. Unfortunately, the joy and happiness is short-lived, and tragedy occurs when Union soldiers arrive with designs on taking over the land. Dances with Wolves was a critical and commercial success, being the 4th highest grossing film of 1990, raking in over $424.2 million. It is credited as the leading influence for the revitalization of the Western genre of filmmaking in Hollywood. The film was nominated for 12 awards at the 63rd Academy Awards and won 7, including Best Picture, Best Director for Kevin Costner. There was some criticism of the film which centered on the lack of authenticity of the Lakota language being used in the film, as only one of the actors was a native speaker of the language. Despite some of the negativity, there's a lot of good feeling about this film in the native community, especially amongst the tribes. It was one of the more outstanding movies from 1990. Pretty Woman. Possibly one of the greatest rom-coms of all time, starring 2 of Hollywood's biggest stars at the time in Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. Gere stars as a wealthy businessman, Edward Lewis, who finds himself in the red light district of Hollywood Boulevard, where he meets streetwalker Vivian Ward. Lost and struggling to operate his stick shift car, Edward accepts Vivian's offer to drive him to the Regent Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Impulsively, he hires her and they spend the night in his penthouse suite getting it on. Vivian is then hired to be Edward's escort for several business and social functions, and their relationship blossoms during her week-long stay with him. Edward finds himself getting drawn into Vivian's free spirit and her warmth, while Vivian experiences luxuries provided from Edward's finances and gains a new perspective on life, becoming a more mature and refined version of herself. The pair face several challenges from friends and business associates about their relationship, given that they come from 2 very different worlds, on top of Edward's own emotional detachment after Vivian says she loves him. Ultimately, the 2 wind up together when Vivian is getting ready to move on from street life and enroll in beauty class. When Edward attempts to live out Vivian's childhood fantasy of being rescued by a knight, she responds by rescuing him back and fulfilling her fantasy, and the 2 going off together. The film titles Pretty Woman is based on the 1964 song Oh Pretty Woman by US singer and guitarist Roy Orbison. As it was one of 1990's highest earners at the box office, Pretty Woman was undeniably a massive success. It drew a massive $463 million and received praise from the usual suspects of movie critics like Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, and CinemaScore. It opened at number 1 on the box office during its opening weekend. It also holds a few notable distinctions like Disney's highest grossing film ever, surpassing 3 Men and a Baby. It was also Disney's highest grossing R-rated release until Deadpool and Wolverine surpassed it in 2024. It is the 4th highest grossing romantic comedy film to date and movie that took Julia Roberts and Richard Gere into the A-list Hollywood mainstream. Home Alone. This is one of the all-time great family movies, one of the quintessential Christmas movies. The movie that took a young Macaulay Culkin and transformed him into one of the most famous child stars, not just of the 90s, but of all time. When people think of Macaulay Culkin, they immediately think of Home Alone. The film is about a young 8-year-old boy, Kevin McAllister, who is left behind at home whilst his family are on vacation in Paris. Kevin embraces this and runs amok, turning the house completely upside down. Kevin's mum, Kate, realizes Kevin's absence mid-flight and upon landing in Paris, immediately looks to return straight back to find Kevin. Meanwhile, Kevin ends up having to protect his home from a couple of burglars known as the Wet Bandits, Marv and Harry. Harry has been casing the house along with others whilst disguised as a security guard. The bandits proceed to raid and loot the houses in the area, all except the McAllisters. They soon discover that Kevin is home alone and they plan an all-out raid, which Kevin overhears. He then proceeds to booby-trap the house with all manner of slapstick inventions which have hilarious consequences for the bandits. They however manage to withstand Kevin's onslaught and eventually gain the upper hand and apprehend Kevin. He is rescued by an old man Marley who had a false reputation as a serial killer, but was really a kind-hearted man looking to reconcile with his son and meet his granddaughter. Eventually Kate returns home and happily reunites with Kevin, along with the rest of the family. Old man Marley has reconciled with his son and he finally met his granddaughter. The movie ends on a funny note as Kev's older brother Gus sees that his room has been completely trashed and Kevin runs off. With plenty of slapstick humor and hijinks, Home Alone is a funny, light-hearted movie which made Macaulay Culkin one of the most well-known faces in Hollywood. Joe Pesci had a stellar year, having appeared in the classic gangster flick Goodfellas, and he went for a completely different tone with the slapstick humor as Harry, teaming with his cohort Marv, played by actor Daniel Stern. Veteran actress Kevin O'Hara features as Kevin's mum Kate, and the late John Candy has a small role as Gus Polinski, a musician from a band that helps Kate in getting home to find Kevin. Home Alone was a phenomenal success, coming in second in the highest grossing movies of the year, bested only by the film Ghost, bringing in a whopping $476.7 million. It was number 1 on the film charts for an impressive 12 weeks. It was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the highest grossing live-action comedy ever, until it was taken by The Hangover Part 2 in 2011. The reviews were something of a mixed bag from the likes of Rotten Tomatoes, but over time it has become a cult Christmas classic, with tons of memorable catchphrases. When you think of the classic 90s movies and all-time Christmas films, Home Alone more often than not gets mentioned. A funny family movie packed with tons of slapstick humor, corny dialogue, and heartwarming moments. Ghost, the number 1 movie of 1990. Ghost is a supernatural romantic film which follows banker Sam Wheat, played by the late Patrick Swayze. He's taken out, but he returns as a ghost to protect his lover Molly Jensen, played by Demi Moore. There is a huge twist when the killer turns out to be Sam's best friend Carl Broner, played by Tommy Goldwyn, who is a corrupt banker. Trapped in an incorporeal spirit and desperate to save Molly, Sam seeks help from a reluctant psychic, Oda Mae Brown, played by Whoopi Goldberg. Through her, Sam is able to communicate with Molly and warn her about Carl to prevent her from also being taken out. A final confrontation is set when a desperate Carl takes Molly hostage and tries to cover his tracks, but ends up in a fight against Sam as a ghost, and ultimately Sam gets his revenge on Carl. As I said earlier, Ghost was the biggest movie in terms of box office revenue of 1990. It grossed a massive $505.7 million at the box office, but incredibly the critical reception was mixed. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave Ghost 2.5 out of 4 stars for his review, regarding the film as no worse an offender than most ghost movies, I suppose. It assumes that even after death we devote most of our attention to unfinished business here on Earth, and that danger to a loved one is more important to a ghost than the infinity it now inhabits. Sure. Metacritic gave it 52 out of 100, indicating negative or mixed reviews. Now, despite the criticism, it still won a slew of awards, including Best Supporting Actress won by Whoopi Goldberg at the Academy Awards and the Golden Globes. It also won Best Screenplay, also at the Academy Awards, and the NAACP Image Awards, also won by Whoopi Goldberg. The famous scene with the pottery wheel involving the 2 leads has gone down as one of the most memorable scenes ever in a movie, and is canon in pop culture entertainment. When it comes to the most remembered films of the 1990s, Ghost will go down as an all-time great. With superb acting, exciting twists, memorable romantic scenes, it is without a doubt an all-timer. And that concludes part 1 of the movies list from 1990. Some all-timers on here, but stay tuned for part 2 as I continue to discuss other great films that came along this year. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.
Was the year 1990.